record it on the computer. Okay. We're just going to give a couple more minutes here. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty in the past, and I think we've resolved it here, but we're just going to wait a minute or two, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're gonna, want to admit that one? Yeah. We're gonna start talking about the microbiome. Thank you for taking the time today and being here. I'm excited to talk about this because this is really a new field. When I say new, in around 2010, 2012, the cost of doing DNA analysis and understanding how many genes and the different gene components of different species, it became very cheap after they mapped the human genome. So the next project was to do the microbiome. And it started around the year 2010, 2012. And the research is absolutely fascinating in this field. I think it's probably more relevant than ever because of what we've heard about with Corona, and we've heard about our immune systems, and we've, you know, and I could tell you just on a personal note that, you know, I have gone through an autoimmune disease. I had some salmonella poisoning, which caused an autoimmune response called Reiter syndrome, where the body is producing white blood cells that are looking for an enemy, and the enemy is not found, so you become the enemy and your body starts attacking itself. And when I went to the medical doctors and asked them what to do, they wanted to shut my immune system down using steroids, and I don't like that idea, so I started on a journey to understand and what's really going on inside of me. Why did I get this reaction? What's happening? And it led me down this amazing journey, and I want to share a lot of it with you because we are not the center of the universe. In other words, this brain and this body are not what determines the health of this human being. It's a lot more intricate than that. It happens to do with the fact that as a human being, we only have around 22,000 genes as a human body. When we look at the microbes that are on and in us, it's between 2 million and 4 million genes of DNA. And that made a lot of sense because scientists were bewildered. How can we produce so many proteins? How can we produce hormones? All of these things that are needed for this human body to be this magnificent thing that it can be. And it boils down to the fact that these microbes provide that. And we're going to take a look at some of the math here. When we look at the population, first of all, in the stomach, we only have between 1,000 and 10,000 microbes. We share there? Are we sharing now? I think we are, right? Good. Okay. But then we go into the small intestine, and it's really interesting. If you can picture this in your mind, when food comes into the stomach, it's a very violent place where stuff is being basically put through an acid wash, and that kills a lot of the microbes, bad and good, that have been on some of that food. And then it goes into the small intestine, and the small intestine starts out almost like a raging river. And it's going at a very fast pace, and it's going through all of these turns, and then it actually starts slowing down as it goes further and further and further. And the small intestine is 27 feet long. So it's between 4 and 5 times as long as you are. And all through that time, there's different species of bacteria. However, most of the food that is processed gets absorbed as opposed to broken down by these microbes, because there's only between, 10,000 to 100, or excuse me, 10 million to 100 million microbes in that area. It's not a huge, huge number. But then we drop into the colon, and this is where the magic begins, and this is where the deficit is, at least in my case, and from what I'm looking at society, this is where our real deficit is. is that in the colon, which is only 6 feet tall, 6 feet long, there are between 10 billion and 10 trillion microbes. And if you think about those numbers, 10 billion to 10 trillion, you know, it's a differential of 1,000, which means that if you were mindful about these bacteria, and if you were truly now putting food into this digestive system, the food that is going to feed your bacteria as opposed to directly feeding the human body through the absorption rate. And if you take a look at the right side of this chart, those are the different species that you're going to be feeding. Those are the different bacteria. However, let's take another thing into the equation. The average life of these bacteria are only 20 minutes. So let's say we have a beautiful family of bacteria, the bifidobacteria in our large intestine. And today we eat some nice fiber. You know, we had some lentils, and we had some chickpeas, and we had some beans, tons of fiber. And we fed those little critters, and the population started to go up, finally peaked, you know, kept going, and then, you know, at the end of one day, we've gone through 72 lifetimes, and the food is all gone. Now, the next day, we don't eat, which means these bacteria are now not getting the nourishment they need. And in order to survive, number one, they're going to decrease in population, but they also need to eat. So they got to find some food. And I'm going to show you what they do for that food, because everything on this planet wants to live, whether it be a weed, whether it be a plant, a tree, whether it be a human being or an animal, everything wants to live, including these bacteria. So these bacteria that live inside of us, they have a very competitive environment. They're all vying for space. Now, the space that they have, when we look at this next chart, the overall surface area of our gut is about the size of a tennis court. So about 2,100 square feet of space. So think about it, when your food goes into your body, it's going to be exposed to that 2,100 square foot of surface area, which is the exchange between the food from the environment and the very fragile blood-brain barrier or blood side of the intestinal wall, where everything is in a different mode. It's in a sanitary mode. So what happens is, if this surface area of our gut gets compromised, and how would it get compromised? I'm going to show you this next slide. And it may look complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it for you. And one second here, I just want to rearrange it so I can see it better. So if we take a look on the right side of the screen, the upper part of the screen is your gut side, where your food comes in, and that's where the microbes are, the guys with the little tails and the little worms and the little bugs. Those are all our microbes. However, they haven't been fed by food. So what they do is they eat what is called the mucosal wall, which is a barrier between your intestinal wall and the food side of your intestinal system. And what happens is, because these microbes need to be fed, and when they are fed on the left, what they're doing is they're producing all of the mucosal wall, which becomes this beautiful lining, and it's described as being like manna from heaven for your gut wall and for your microbes to be able to do their thing. So they hang out in this mucosal wall. The mucosal wall gives nutrition to that one cell thick membrane, which is so important to be able to transfer with tight junctions all of the nutrition into your body. And this mucosal wall gives it nourishment and gives it health. However, on the right side, if we're not mindful, and by the way, when we co-evolved with these microbes, we co-evolved with around between 50 and 70 grams of fiber in our diet a day. What's fiber? Fiber are things that we cannot absorb in the small intestine. They get broken down by a symphony of different bacteria that come in. And I saw a beautiful video that showed that when you eat things like, let's say, cannellini beans, and you eat these beans and they get down into the large intestine. And by the way, as soon as that food comes into your mouth, immediately the microbes that are in your mouth start to transmit neurochemicals that hit the sensors in your mouth that connect to the vagus nerve. And there are between 100 and 200 million sensors in the vagus nerve between your butt and your mouth, and they connect to your brain. And these chemicals are two ways. They go both directions. The brain is communicating to the microbes, and the microbes are communicating to the brain. And when you're eating your food and you're chewing it properly, and the microbes in the mouth decipher what's going on, they're immediately sending chemicals down so that the microbes down in the large intestine can start to get ready and start to mobilize to know that food is on its way. That's how intricate the system works. It's a system of communication and signals. So at the same time, if you're not feeding these bacteria down in the gut, they know they're not getting fed. And whatever's coming down, there's going to be other colonies that are going to try to capitalize on whatever food source you're bringing in. And the more refined it is, the more genetically modified it is. All of these factors come in, and before long, what you end up having is you end up having bacteria colonies that you have no desire to have inside of you, but they are becoming the main dominant factor in your microbe community, because they happen because of the food source coming in, which was not mindful. You know, when I used to eat based upon whatever I thought I had a taste for. And I used to say, you know, boy, I got a really good relationship with my gut. I know what I should eat. I know what's best for me. Matter of fact, when my wife brought up, let's do a meatless Tuesday or something, and I go, you know, honey, that might be great for you. I love the concept, but it's not for me. You know, I know what's right for me. Well, I was partly right, because the microbes that I was feeding were so dominant that they were actually creating the neurochemicals that were driving my desires of what I was going to eat next. That's how intricate it is. It goes this far in that they have now discovered that there's a yeast that lives in our small intestine. It's called Candida. And Candida is known because when it gets out of size of the normal population, so in other words, everything is okay when it's in balance. But when we get out of balance and we automatically, you know, start to have a colony size that gets too big, it's not the way things were meant to be. So Candida, most of these bacteria, by the way, only have, you know, 4 to 20 genes in them. Candida, however, has almost 13,000 genes. It's mind-boggling. Candida is really meant to be in the human body, that when the body dies off, it's really meant to rot the body from the inside out, but in small quantities throughout the life, it plays other purposeful systems. But when it gets out of control, what happens is it produces a chemical that gets into our bloodstream, and our brain becomes used to that chemical. When that chemical is no longer being supplied to the brain, it produces the same symptoms as a drug addict would go through without getting the drug that they need. They go through withdrawal symptoms until Candida gets fed, and Candida gets, as a byproduct of its metabolism, produces a chemical that gets in the blood that eventually works its way up to the brain, that eases that anxiety that was being caused because of a chemical imbalance that was becoming a new baseline because of the constant feeding from the Candida producing that chemical. So if somebody is trying to quit having a bagel in the morning, and they're trying to white knuckle it, and it seems like they're going through hell, and you get grumpy as hell, and the person in front of you can't go fast enough, and everything is upset, and all of a sudden you eat that bagel and you give this big aha, That is actually a chemical reaction that you are getting from a biological feeding that you are making to a bacteria, and it's getting in your blood and it's giving you the relief that you need. Next time, what you need to do is get a 12-step program, a sponsor, and work and work a system as if you were going through a drug withdrawal, because that's what you are. And that's what I learned is so profound in the fact that we think that we can change our diet. We think that it's easy for us to just say, okay, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. But we're not always running the show. 90% of our serotonin is produced by gut bacteria. Let me say that again. 90% of our serotonin is produced by gut bacteria. By the way, Prozac is the most widely prescribed prescription in the United States, and it is serotonin, and it's taken in the stomach and it replaces what the gut bacteria would do. So in my eyes, why wouldn't I want to learn how to be able to constantly feed the bacteria that can produce serotonin naturally, so that my experience in life would be different, as opposed to maybe not being as enjoyable as what it was meant to be? Because when we co-evolved with these bacteria, we were doing tons of fiber. Matter of fact, I love facts that I pull up from a lot of this research. And Thomas Edison and Albert Einstein both had worked with a lot of plant-based diets. And in their notes, both of them had observed that some of the greatest breakthroughs that they had made were when they were on a plant-based diet. And that raises a couple questions, because before people would say, oh, that's great because of the anti-inflammatory effect and the fact that, then somebody could think clear and they could be able to come up with that. Or here's another theory that is emerging now that we know that all of this DNA, which is the knowledge of the universe, if those colonies were being fed exclusively and they were becoming the dominant factor within his gut, and the gut was communicating through the vagus nerve to the brain, is it possible that the bacteria carry some knowledge in the DNA that they have, as opposed to us carrying all the knowledge in the DNA that we have? Or do we think that we're just smart and we can figure things out? Who knows what the answer is, but I think it's quite humbling to realize that these bacteria play the crucial role that they do in our lives to the extent that they do. One of the things that I think is really important that I sometimes don't dwell on enough is one of the most basic things, and that is our drinking water. Because drinking water, we are when we're born, we're up to 80% water, and when we die, we get down in the 50s or 60s, but we're really comprised of water. And water is not what water used to be, and it's such an important part. So let me tell you what I do is the first thing I do when I take up a residence is I immediately get a reverse osmosis 6 or 7 stage filter to be able to take out all of the chlorine, the fluoride, and everything out of the water, because I don't want any of that stuff in my water. I want pure, clean water coming into my body for a couple reasons. One of the most unobvious is the fact that all of that chlorine in that water is going to affect over time the microbiome inside your gut. Chlorine is used to kill any microbes in the water. If we're drinking water, it's killing the microbes in the water that we are now putting inside of us, so we're killing the microbes inside of us. So what we want to do is we want to be mindful of the fact that water is extremely important. I can tell you that on the farm here, I'm irrigating because we have not gotten any of the rain that some people have experienced in the last week or two. We're experiencing one of the worst droughts. And one of the things I can give you a marked difference in is when I use the fire hydrants and I'm pumping water through, I do not see the same kind of growth. The microbiome in the soil is compromised because of all of that chlorine going into my soil. And I don't like doing it, but I'm forced to do it unless I have an alternative that would, get me around that. But, water is extremely important. So I really think there's another aspect to water that I think if people really start to understand, we could not have life without water. Water is so essential for human life. And water also carries structure, it carries energy. Having your water put in a pitcher and swirling it before you start drinking it, that water gets restructured, and it's a lot healthier structure than what it had going through pipes and through bends and all of this way, and then being squished through filters. So one of the other things I do is I have a secondary filter called a Berkey filter, and it does another filtration, and it drops the water in a waterfall so that it becomes a more natural thing. So water, I think, is extremely important to remember that we can't be healthy without healthy water. And the bottled water is in some cases even worse than the drinking water that you get out of the tap. And the reason is that the estrogen that can be released through the plastics that are used, the cheap plastics to make those bottles, they're disruptors, they're endocrine disruptors in the body. They affect the human body a lot. So I really think water is something, and you should plan your water. When I go somewhere, I make sure that I'm bringing my water with me, or I know I have a source, and my teas, and then think it through further, because then we'd have ice cubes. We should really put that after the filter and have filtered ice cubes if we're using ice cubes on a regular basis, because a little bit of chlorine is not good. It's best to have no if you can think it through. The other thing is that there's an awful lot that's coming into our body because of a company called Monsanto, and there's probably one of the best sites that I can show you. It's called the Environmental Working Group, and I'm going to bring that up for you right now. Let's see if we want to stop share, and then we're going to go to, okay. So this is Environmental Working Group, and this is a nonprofit company that lives off donations and people that understand that we need companies that are not government sponsored, that just do research. And what they do is they talk about everything happening. And like right now, hummus, and I've known this for years, and I'm so glad that they're doing studies and letting everybody know. Hummus or chickpeas, if they're not organic, are some of the most contaminated food on the planet right now. Okay? And if you're buying hummus and it's not organic, you don't want to be doing that. At least I would not put it in my body. And the reason is there is this product being used that Monsanto makes that is being used in our agricultural system, and it's called Roundup, or glyphosate is the other term. And what it is it's this nasty chemical that's very toxic to any vegetation on the planet. However, they've taken the food that we are growing and they've modified one of the genes so that the plant absorbs the poison and doesn't die. And the chemical also has another attribute to it, that when a plant is dead, when you spray it on it, it basically is a desiccant. It pulls every last bit of moisture out of it. So in the case of chickpeas, they're very dense beans, so it takes quite a while for them to dry. So what they do is, before they harvest the crop, they spray it, they drench the field with Roundup. So they come back out with the combine, and when they combine all the peas, they're already dried and everything, and they immediately can take them to market or put them in their storage because they've dried out in the field, and they don't have to wait for natural conditions. They're now doing it with all the wheat. So the sad thing is that unless bread is organic or pizza is organic, pizza dough, it's all got glyphosate in it. There are 2.7 billion pounds of glyphosate being poured on the planet annually today. In the state of Louisiana, along the Mississippi Valley, it is so, because that is a drainage of the whole Mississippi River and the whole farming district, it is so concentrated that it's found in the rainwater, it's found in the air, it's found in the drinking water, it's found in the soil, it's found everywhere. It's that contaminated. It has a profound effect on the human body, in particular with the reproductive organs. We could go, they cover it on EWG, but there's another site, and this is very easy. It's called Environmental Working Group, or edwardwaltergeorge.org. and that's a great site to be able to be aware. They have a clean 15 and a dirty dozen list. The dirty dozen tells you the foods that you should not eat unless they're organic. And then the clean 15 are foods that you can save your money and you don't have to make sure that you're getting organic. They're pretty clean on their own. So the Environmental Working Group is one place. The other place is a place called the Detox Project.org. Okay? And what this is this is a site where you can learn all about what is happening and what glyphosate does to the body, what effects it has. It can even tell you how you can send a hair sample in and get a test to see how much glyphosate is in your body today. And then you can have a diet that will help you leach it out, or at least stop putting it into your body. And I've done that test, and you know, I recall that, you know, the average is right around, you know, 0.7 parts per billion in the human body, and I think mine was down around, you know, 0.23, and I have a very clean diet, but it's still very difficult not to have in your diet. But you'll learn that there are a lot of foods that, by having them in your diet, what it does to the microbiome, which is most alarming to me, is that it doesn't seem to have the effect on the colonies of bacteria like Salmonella and some of the highly parasitic colonies. It doesn't seem to affect them as much, and it lets them live. And the good colonies tend to be hindered and tend to be having a more difficult time in that environment. And that's not surprising to me, because, you know, it's a toxic environment. And when you think about it, we have this opportunity that if we start to become mindful of this world within us, this living thing within us, they're calling it the living brain. They're saying that it could be, in essence, almost more important than the other brain, because this one, we can change things that can have a profound effect on the brain. If I can produce serotonin here, you know, wow, that makes a lot of sense. How about dopamine? You know, and I can tell you from an experience point of view, you know, 3-4 years ago, I used to experience a lot of anxiety that I just saw was part of life. So if I was late for something, I would look at my watch, I would see that I was late, I would get this vagus nerve pop that would go down and tell my bacteria to get on board, because we got an event going on. I would get adrenaline, I would get cortisone, and then these bacteria would release chemicals. And in most cases, they were producing more anxiety-based chemicals because of the parasitic colonies that I had, which were actually making my condition worse. What I experience today with the same condition, that if I'm late for something, the same thing happens. I see that something has happened. It's unexpected. My vagus nerve gets my bacteria. They start to secrete what they're capable of secreting. And what am I getting? I'm getting serotonin, dopamine. I'm getting relaxation. I'm getting calming, as opposed to a reaction. I can give a response. So all of a sudden, I'm in more control. And guess what? I always get where I'm supposed to be when I get there anyway, because that's the way life is. It just might not be according to my time frame in my head, but that's okay. That's just the way it is. But I can see that clearly when I have chemicals rotating in my body that are a byproduct of what I've been feeding the colonies, so that those guys are inside of me. You know, if I feed meat, I get meat eaters. If I feed veggies, I get veggie eaters. And it's really profound. It gets this deep. I listen to all these podcasts, you know, it's kind of exciting to me. I know it may sound boring, but one of them is called The Perfect Stool. It's a doctor that works with, she's a practitioner, and she has a podcast, and she talks about how important a stool is, because that is a microbial report card. And what they were talking about is, they were talking about how this is so profound, because by taking a fecal sample from a human body, and between 55 and 60% of the dry weight of that fecal matter is microbial bodies. They can analyze that, and they can tell you with over 95% certainty whether you're overweight or not, just by the bacteria that are residing within you. So people that suffer with weight loss, guess what? If you understood the bacteria inside of you, or if you had an influence over the bacteria inside of you, it would be a lot easier to change the weight factor, because that is all that is your engine. That is your basis from running. Those are the colonies that are doing the job. And it's so profound that if they take the feces from an overweight human being and they put them into a germ-free mouse, which they have these mice that they raise that don't have any microbiome, they introduce a microbiome of an obese human being and the mouse becomes obese. And if they take and they put that of a normal person into that same mouse next to it, the opposite will happen. And then if they transfer from that thin one, they give them some of the feces from the other mouse that was obese, that mouse turns obese. And that was very profound to me, and really just started to make a lot of sense, because they're now finding that things like Crohn's disease also have an overpopulation of certain bacteria in the colony, autism as well. And they're trying to figure out, is the autism a result that causes the bacteria to be the way, or are the bacteria having the effect? And another study I saw where they had a gentleman who had Alzheimer's, but he got this terrible sickness, an infection called claustrophilia, I believe it is. It's a terrible, you get diarrhea in the body, and the only way that they found is doing a fecal transplant. Well, they did the fecal transplant to this guy. They allow that. That's one of the only cases they allow it. Lo and behold, his Alzheimer's improves. Is that surprising to me? Absolutely not, because I could tell you that I'm 64 years old, and for the last 30 years, my memory and my mind were not as sharp as they are today, and I can understand why, because I understand the bacteria colonies that I used to have in dominance and the ones that I have now, and the different chemicals that they were producing, and the inflammation that I had in my body, caused an awful lot of brain fog. And I'm sure I had leaky gut as well. So that does not surprise me one bit. But I can tell you that I'm extremely mindful about what I'm doing now, because it doesn't take that much out of my day. As a matter of fact, it makes my day more enjoyable, because now I don't have to worry about what this guy wants to eat every day. What does Tom feel like eating? No, it's okay. I got some responsibility. I got to make sure that I'm feeding these guys fiber. So, I want to make sure that I've got some oats in my diet, or I've got some beans or some lentils, and we can talk about the foods again, the fresh foods, or the garlic, the jicama, sweet potatoes, yellow, purple potatoes are preferred. Any potatoes that are cooked and then cooled down become resistant starch. They're excellent for the body. Lentils, whole grain rices, instead of white rice, which is refined, go with a brown rice, a black rice, a red rice. Red rice has selenium in it, which is excellent for the brain, which helps also with, some people have said that selenium helps with your resistance to, different viruses like coronavirus. Selenium is also in Brazil nuts. So I make sure I have a couple Brazil nuts, or I'm getting red rice regularly in my diet. But I'm being mindful of these guys, as opposed to always thinking about what I think would taste good. And lo and behold, then what happens is all of your appetites, your desires, your cravings switch to what the microbes inside of you are looking to have. And then being able to think about these microbes, different foods become irritants to certain microbes, and they're okay with certain microbes. So here's the beauty of what else we can incorporate into our routine. The perfect time of year, we have garlic. And garlic has so many uses in the human body. Number one, it's an excellent microbiome food. Number two, it has a characteristic that no other food on the planet has. When you take a clove of garlic, in any garlic except elephant garlic is not a garlic, it's in the onion family, or excuse me, in the leek family. But every other clove of garlic has a chemical and an enzyme that sit in separate cells, allan and allanase. And when you get these two enzyme and chemical to touch by smashing, mincing, or slicing, in 10 minutes, a new chemical compound is maximized called allicin. And allicin has some particular characteristics that when it gets inside of our gut, it knows which bacteria do not belong in our ecosystem and which do. And it will kill off parasitic colonies that are residing in us. And the best time to do that is within an hour of rising and an hour of going to bed. And you smash that garlic, you wait 10 minutes, and then you swallow it down with water to wash it through the gut, through the stomach. When it gets in that small intestine, that allicin will get in there and it will start to kill off some of those bacteria and make their life miserable. And I've had people do this. You do it for 3 days and they'll get rid of any sickness that you have immediately happening in your body. If you do it for 7 to 14 days, you're now going to go deeper into your microbiome because you're hitting it day after day. You're hitting these resilient colonies and you're knocking them down, giving room for the new guys to come in. New guys keep coming in and you're feeding them daily, so you're doing that. I've had people go as long as 28 days and they've had really profound changes and a lot of changes in thought patterns because a lot of thoughts are contingent upon the chemicals that are produced in the colonies in our gut. And if we have parasitic ones, they're either taking up room that other ones could be resident, or they're producing parasitic thoughts or negative thoughts. So it's really a great thing to do. Other things that help the same way are some of the herbs that we have available. So that's why it's so important to get herbs into our diet. So cinnamon is a great one. Oregano oil. So a lot of people have talked about oregano oil being a great antimicrobial. So one of the things that I did when we had the first COVID, what I did was I'd take hot water, I'd put some oregano oil in the hot water, and then I would put a towel over the bowl and be able to inhale all of that oregano oil to bring it into my lungs, that in case there was any kind of viral contamination that came in my passageways, whatever, that oregano oil would be a powerful deterrent to that. So that's what I use oregano oil. And you can use oregano oil as well in the gut. Again, using it in a very mindful way that you're going to be using it to try to get some bacteria that maybe are parasitic or something out of the body. Do it for a mindful period of time. And then go back to natural. Go back to letting your body be where it is. So people say, well, do you use garlic every day? No, I don't, but I use garlic for specific reasons. And when I do want to enjoy a good meal with a lot of garlic, I do. But I also realize that part of the reason that garlic works on our body, it's a very powerful neurotoxin. So if you are going to consume a lot of garlic, realize that the next day you're probably going to have a little bit of brain fog, or you may not be as intellectually strong as you were because if you took a heavy dose, like maybe had 2 or 3 bulbs of garlic on a garlic bread like I tend to do this time of year, it could affect my clarity of mind the next day because of its effect on the central nervous system. It's a neurotoxin. That's how it works with the body. Irritates the nervous system, pushes the immune system starts to tweak up and start to come to attention. The other beautiful part about garlic is there's this other term that is very new to us, and it's called the epigenetics. And the epigenetics are that as a human being, I have all of this DNA within me, and I have the ability to express health. I have the ability to have cancer fighting ability, have blood pressure regulated, have heartbeat regulated, pain regulated, inflammation. However, if my switch for that is not turned on in my DNA, and my cancer switch of being able to kill cancer, that switch isn't on, then the cancer cell could very well live in my body because I have the capability, but I don't have the switch on. Be no different than a very hot day having air conditioning in your car, but you don't know how to turn it on. Same thing. Our foods turn our switches on for our capabilities of our DNA. The second most epigenetically food to the human genome is garlic. That's why garlic has over 50% of the cures that Dr. Weil explains of the herbal world. And the reason that they affect our body is because of the epigenetics. that is the ultimate, because when those different chemicals get broken down, the components, they trigger the signals in our genome to express itself and fight the cancer and get rid of inflammation, get rid of pain, all of those things. By the way, the most epigenetically connected plant to the human genome of all the plants on the planet is a cannabis plant, which we hear about the hemp, which is a legal version of the cannabis plant. It's all one plant. There are just different breeds of the plant that have less THC, which is only one component that's psychoactive. But the other components have such epigenetic connection to the human genome, it's mind-boggling. They are like key and lock signatures that unlock our healing ability of the human body. And that's the beauty. It's also a very powerful antimicrobial. So that's why we started doing hemp as well on the farm. And of course, garlic, which we're bringing out. So those are a couple of the antimicrobials that you can start to introduce into your body, again, in a mindful way. If I'm sick, boy, the first thing I want to do is I want to get garlic into my body, you know, twice a day for 3 days in a row, and that's going to get rid of the immediate problem I have. This time of year, I'm going to want to do a nice cleanse of the body, the microbiome. It's a good time to do that. I can get plenty of garlic in my body to feed the microbiome as well. Leeks, onions. Onions are like a staple. Almost everything you make, onions can be included. You know, put them in your rice dish, put them in your lentils, put them everywhere. You know, one of my soups I make every week or two is a combination. I use yellow peas, I use green peas, I use some red lentils, I use onions, I'll use some carrots, I'll use some celery, and then I'll use some organic vegetable stock, and I'll put that all together, and I end up making this really great microbiome food. And I use it, and I use it over a couple-day period, and I mindfully will put a little bit in the system. Next time, I'll put a little bit more in the system. And then the third time, I can even put more because I'm building up my colonies. And then I can do that without any discomfort to my body, and I can build up the colonies, and then I can keep the colonies high if I want to keep them high, but I got to remember the next day I got to give them something. So it depends on how you're running. Now, the beauty is that when you're using these bacteria in the large intestine, and you're using the fiber foods to feed them, you're producing the effect on the body that you're no longer depending on sugars for fuel, and you're now using low glycemic proteins and fibers and things that are being used to produce energy. And for the next 24 hours, your body will not have a spike on your glycemic load as it would if you didn't have those beans. So an example would be, if I ate beans today, and later in the day, I decided to have something that was high glycemic, like maybe a piece of refined bread or some white rice. It will dampen the effect of the increase in the glucose load to my body, so my body will not have to produce as much insulin. And that is extremely healthy, and it also means that your body will be burning things as opposed to storing them. So as you start to feed bacteria, as you start to shift from a diet of feeding the human body with refined foods that we see everywhere because they're value added and they last a long time, as we start shifting to foods that are just feeding microbiome, we change our energy source. Instead of burning pieces of paper in the stove, we're burning pieces of log in there or a piece of coal in there. That will be a longer term piece of energy for us and a lot easier on the human body. And then one of the other things that's extremely helpful is to realize that this digestive system needs to have some rest. It needs to be able to, it's very complex, these microbes, if they're working all the time. So if we're eating every time we're awake, my God, when we go to sleep, it just gets done finishing the digestion, and now it wants to detox, and it's getting fed again, so now it's going to go right back into digestion. So what's called intermittent fasting is what everybody calls it. I call it timed feeding, is where I try to only feed for an 8 to 10 hour window and keep between 14 and 16 hours that I'm not going to be feeding the microbiome, and letting the microbiome rest and letting the whole digestive system go through its detox system to be able to be healthy for the next day. And then the next day, what should happen is that I should be able to wake, I should be able to eliminate, and then start to feed. And sometimes in the morning, I won't take food in, but I have a couple tricks that I like to do. And one of them is I like a mild cup of coffee. But in my coffee, what I do is I add chicory root. Why chicory root? Chicory root is a very powerful microbiome food. It happens to be a beautiful herb that grows wild. It has a very, it's not very leafy. It's very sticky in form, and it has blue flowers on it. It grows in our parking lot where there's no soil. And it has this beautiful long taproot. And that root comes out and you dry it and roast it, and I can buy it. We carry it here in the store. And during World War II, it was used as a coffee substitute because it has a beautiful flavor. So what I do in the morning is I'll take my CBD oil, I'll take my coffee, and I'll take my chicory, and I'll put that in a blender, and then I'll drink that. And what that's doing is it's feeding my microbiome. It's not putting me into a digestive mode. It's keeping me in ketosis because I'm not eating any carbs. So my body is still going through this detox project or detox process until I start to take food back into the body, which is usually a meal that's mid-morning, late morning. And again, has to have fiber in it. So I'm usually including fiber. And then I also try throughout the day to be mindful of what I can bring in that's living food. So like a kimchi or sauerkraut, I'll try to put some of that on my food as I'm eating. A non-dairy yogurt, I like to do non-dairy because I tend to find that it makes more sense and it's better in my belief system to do non-dairy. So I do non-dairy yogurts. And I'll do kombuchas because kombuchas are fungus-based, which our bodies are probably, our whole energy systems are based on mycelium, and that's our energy system. And it's really just magical how all of this stuff that we don't see, how all of it operates. And it's identical inside of our bodies in the soil and the ground that the plants are enjoying as well. That's the fact that it's really simple. It's not like we're so divine and we have this magical system. No, the same bacteria that are in the soil that are decomposing things are delivering the symbiotic relationship to plants. When a plant is growing, a plant can give up to 30% of its energy off in the form of carbohydrates to fungi who take the carbohydrate sugars and transfer it to the fungi itself in return for water and minerals that the fungi brings to the plant. So the plant becomes mobile through this fungus, allowing it to be mobile to bring minerals from far away and bring them through its mycelium strain directly to the plant and bring water as well. And when we have drought conditions as we do today, that's what's sad, because this whole underground system is hindered because of the climate change we're going through. Because I've never seen weather conditions like this in my lifetime, where I haven't seen rain up here. The ground is so dry, everything's brown. It's just crazy. But, that's out of our control. But if we understand what is in our control, what's in our control is a microbiome within us, this garden within us, and diversity is the key to health and wellness. So how do you get diversity? Be around pets, be around animals. These animals have digestive systems. When they breathe on you, when a dog comes in and he gives you a kiss after running around and smelling every single thing out there, he's giving you a bonus that I'm glad, if some people thought about it, they might not allow the dog to do it, but thank God they don't think about it. They get to this affection. But that's like the biggest microbiome boost you could get. It's amazing. And we buy these probiotics. Well, instead of buying a probiotic, get kimchi in your diet or sauerkraut in your diet every day. And I can tell you a real interesting story. When I started eating kimchi, and I never ate it, I started to eat it. All of a sudden, after a couple of weeks, I just I started eating a lot of it. And I kept it at home. And my wife says, you know, I know you're getting healthy and I really am happy for you, but you got to get another refrigerator. You got to do something because I can't stand the smell of that kimchi. I says, okay, I understand, you know, and I was kind of mindful about it, but I still left it there. Well, after a little over a year, she started eating the kimchi. And the reason is that the bacteria that were so resident within me and that were so resident in our environment, and the studies actually show that the companions that are in your life will have a big influence on what your microbiome is. And that's where it's really important that when you get around a lot of people that are very positive and that have things to offer you, you know, you're not only getting what they have to offer you, but you're also getting part of their microbiome, whether you want it or not. Now, with COVID-19, it's raising our awareness. You know, do we want to go around, you know, breathing other people's microbiomes? No, but we probably want to be in gardens more because the ground is loaded with them. We want to be around animals more. We want to be around the people that are close to us that do those same kinds of things because they are safe. But we want to be mindful about these things because diversification of this microbiome. So besides putting the probiotics in, I also want to use a diversity of food. So I'll use a food like jicama. I never had jicama before. It's a root, very powerful gut microbiome food. Started eating that. Jerusalem artichokes, started eating those. You know, started just looking and saying, okay, if these are the foods that are going to give me the best health that I could have, may not be the tastiest stuff I want, but if that's what it's going to do, I'm going to give it a shot. And after I give it a shot, all of a sudden it becomes easy because you could feel the benefit, you could see the benefit. You know, all of a sudden you have clarity that you were really being distracted from what real health is, because real health is no different than having a pet or a plant. It's being mindful of what you're doing and taking on the responsibility of keeping your tribes in the proper colonies in proper shape and feeding them daily. And do we have any questions now?
We had a couple a little bit ago.
Yeah.
One wanted to know if you could list some podcasts, books, websites, things to go to that you are actively involved in.
Yeah. There's one podcast called The Microbiome. The other one is The Perfect Stool. Gosh, if you Google this, I mean, I Google it, I search it, and so much comes up. They come up because this is like cutting edge. This is, when I was a stockbroker, you know, that's where I was on that edge. That's where my advantage was, learning what was going to happen in mainstream down the road. You know, I was learning about LED lights before people heard what LED, you know, what even was. And I'm looking at this now, and this is exactly the same thing. What they're thinking that medicine down the road will be is that it'll be personalized. Well, they're going to be able to look at your microbiome and be able to understand what's going on within you. And until that happens, what we can do is we can take an active role in realizing that if we feed the foods that feed these microbes and we start to become mindful, just like the fact that it was pretty profound to me that 20-minute lifespan for bacteria. So 20 minutes, holy smokes, 1 hour, 3 lifetimes, 24 hours, 72 lifetimes. Wow, 2 days, 144 lifetimes. What happens to any species that isn't fed for 144 lifetimes? And then if all of a sudden I start feeding them, yeah, no wonders I might have a digestive issue, because now I put a huge amount of food in there, but I don't have a lot. So now other colonies are going to start to take advantage of that food. And then I even took it one step further, because my whole life, you know, I was told to chew my food, and I just couldn't find a reason to. So I never really listened to that. But then I thought about it and I said, holy smokes, these microbes. If I got this huge chunk of food and all these microbes are trying to get at it, as opposed to chewing it up, and now I got it spread out all over, the chances are I'm going to be able to feed a hell of a lot more tribes, because there's mere surface area of just chewing that food properly. So it slowed me down a little bit, because there's a purpose to that chewing as opposed to just getting the taste and the flavor out of it. It's really a functional thing now, because I got to make those guys' job easier, and it's easier for me to keep track of which colonies, because the good guys are going to get fed if it's broken down good. If not, you know, they're going to be struggling to digest it, and maybe they won't do it as quickly, and maybe it'll linger for a real long time. So you got this, it's what's happening within is what's happening without. On the planet right now, if you take a look at the diversity on the planet, you know, it's the same thing. We have mindfulness inside of us that we can say, okay, we want to have a farm that has, beautiful crops growing on it with a beautiful system, or we could just have monocropping all over. And what's healthier for the land? What's healthier for our health? Obviously diversification. Question.
Someone wanted to know what the water purifying system you use in your home is.
Yeah, I got one. It's called filter123.com, I think is the name of it. It's on Amazon, and I got a 6-stage reverse osmosis with also the remineralization at the end, because we do have mineral deficiency, so I do put that back in. I just bought one because we got another farm here, and it was around $300, and I self-installed it. It's got a reservoir tank, and the water just tastes magnificent. When you taste that water, it's like, it has no flavor, and you're like, wow, it's just so wonderful. It's the way water's supposed to taste. It's not supposed to taste at all. And then Berkey is the other company that makes a very high quality filter. It's still a very expensive filter. If I were to get either a Berkey or the reverse osmosis, I would definitely go the reverse osmosis because of the depth that it goes to, and the operational costs are less than a Berkey would be, because without a reverse osmosis, your Berkey would have to work a lot harder to get both fluoride and chlorine out of the water. So I would recommend the reverse osmosis versus a Berkey to start out.
And then someone had a question on garlic. They said they went to go purchase some garlic, and the ends had been grinded down. The garlic was from Argentina. She had heard that this wasn't necessarily good garlic because it's been irradiated.
Right. So first of all, 70% of the garlic in the world comes from China. Garlic is very labor intensive. There's 21 interventions with a human being from the time of planting to the time of harvesting. So it's very labor intensive. And your end product, once you pull it out, it keeps getting lighter and lighter. So people want to sell it quickly, or they want to try to stop that process. In order to bring it in this country, the ag and market of the United States is forcing anybody that brings it in from other countries to grind the roots off, because that could carry disease from the other country. So that's the reason they grind the roots off. Another practice is, because garlic is a strange vegetable. If you store garlic at cold temperatures like normal vegetables, it's now got triggered enzymes that as soon as you put it in warm weather, it's going to start to sprout. So that's not a good thing. So what they do is they'll take the garlic and they'll radiate it with radiation. So now the garlic can't sprout. So now you have dead tissue that has been chilled, and you can buy the dead tissue. The dead tissue will taste like garlic. I don't eat it. I don't use it. I only buy organic garlic or have my own garlic. And a co-op usually has organic garlic from South America. They have it opposite cycle of us. And usually you can get good garlic every time of the year. There are 9 different DNAs, but all garlic will be very healthy for you. The different DNAs just have different flavor profiles, but they all have allicin, which is really the best microbial you could possibly have for your gut. Highly medicinal. Ginger is another wonderful thing. One of my favorite drinks is to take some hot water, to take some cherry juice, some ginger, some honey, and some lime peel and all, and put that in a blender, pour it through a sieve, and you get this beautiful antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory drink. Ginger is great for the gut. Turmeric also, very powerful antimicrobials. These foods are very powerful foods because they co-evolved with us, and they're on this planet to help with our microbial balances, and that's what we should use them for. And they're really powerful in doing that. So,
someone would like to know where to find some Jerusalem artichokes.
Jerusalem artichokes, we will start to have in the fall. It's pure inulin. We grew a spiral of them here. You can see it from Google Space, and we put it in here for the community. So we have you-pick Jerusalem artichokes both in the spring and the fall. And they look like these huge tubers that grow under. They almost look like sunflowers. They're so prolific, you can't get rid of them once you start growing them. You take them and you put them in your house so you got food for the rest of your life. They'll just keep growing and growing and give you an abundance. They're considered to be a survival food because they just produce such tonnage. We probably will have, 5,000 pounds out there this year. And really a wonderful food. But again, great for building the microbial system, but got to do it in balance. Because if you eat too many Jerusalem artichokes and if you had other food before you ate the Jerusalem artichokes, you're going to produce a lot of gas with the Jerusalem artichokes, and the other food might not be through your digestive system, and you might cause, some loading problems with gas pressure. So, you just want to be aware of those things so that you don't have a bad experience feeding your bacteria. It'd be easier for us almost if we had a beautiful vessel, a big, 5-gallon jug of glass that we could see sauerkrauts and all these things fermenting and bubbling away. And if we could see that, it would be so easy for us to see our digestive system. And that's what it would be like. But now take a look at that visualization and start to throw some of the stuff that we throw our body in there. Throw a chicken leg in there. And it's sitting right in there with the bacteria that digest the cabbages, and they're trying to figure out, well, what do I do with this? How do I get rid of it? One of the studies that was really interesting that I just learned this last week was that what they're finding is that when we eat the fibers and we have these bacteria, they produce what's called anaerobic fermentation. It's an oxygen-free environment. And that oxygen-free environment becomes an environment that is extremely helpful to that gut, and it kills off certain parasitic colonies that shouldn't be there. They like oxygen. But what happens is when we don't feed them, we get to aerobic fermentation, which produces some of the oxygens that allow other colonies to now start to proliferate that wouldn't. So it's that profound. It's the gases that are produced by the bacteria as well. Because a chicken leg ferments completely different than a Jerusalem artichoke or green bean or a cabbage would. But we're so versatile, and this intestine is around that we can still get all this done. But it's no wonder that if you have a big steak and you got a potato and you got veggies and you got bread and you got butter and you got fat, and you got all these combinations, and they're all different colonies and they're all mixed up. And all these colonies are next to each other because the food got mixed up all together, and they're all like, I don't like you, you don't like me, and we got to get this done, and some isn't getting done by the right bacteria. I can understand where digestion becomes a very energy intensive function of the human body because it's not running smoothly, because we've just kind of loaded everything that our little heart desired right in there, plopped with a big scoop of ice cream, and not to mention, the glyphosate and stuff that was there. And if there was an alcoholic drink, wow, that's another dose of powerful antimicrobial. So.
And then someone wants to know your feelings on the Aqua True water filter. It's another reverse osmosis system.
Yeah, I personally believe that pretty much all of them out there that companies that have them right now, they got to be good. Otherwise the companies wouldn't be around. Unless it's like a quarter of the cost of something, then I would question it. But, they're all basic, and, I got 1, 2, 3 filter just simply because that was what I had gotten for like 3-4 years, or 3-4 times now, and they work. But pretty much I haven't heard of any bad filters. It's really important. You can even go as far as to think about the fact that our skin microbes are really important to us. Matter of fact, the reason a mosquito would bite one person versus another is predicated based upon the microbial environment on your skin, which happens to be a direct correlation to the food that you eat because of the secretions from your skin that can cause those bacteria to eat those secretions. So a lot of people say, oh, you must eat a lot of sugar, that's why the mosquitoes bite you. No, the sugars cause bacteria that the mosquitoes find are good for them to be able to know that they got a great source of food there, and it's attractive to them. So a lot of people will even go as far as to put a filter on their shower head so that their outside microbiome isn't constantly being compromised from the chemicals that we bring in through the drinking water. I haven't gone that far, but I also don't think that you should shower multiple times a day or necessarily every day, because I don't think that the microbiome needs to be constantly washed off unless you really need that, because your conditions are such. It was interesting because if you look at research in the Roman times, these Roman warriors, gladiators, they would actually scrape the skin and collect the microbiome. At the time, they didn't know it was a microbiome, but they would get the sweat off the gladiators, and that was considered to be that you were lucky to be able to take some of that and put it on your body, and you were sharing the microbiome of that guy. At the time, they didn't know why, but they were doing that. That's some of the stuff that had taken place. How did we know to do that? There's another saying that I love, that what is our culture based on? I mean, we would go up to somebody and we would shake hands with somebody, and we would also get a gut feel about somebody from doing that process. And there's something more profound going on, because the bacteria inside of us communicate with magnetism. That's how they're able to communicate. We never understood this. So you have a colony of bacteria here, and you have another predatory colony of bacteria here that's dominant. And this one wants to manifest itself to take over this one. But they know that they're not big enough, and all of a sudden they get to a certain colony size and they light up and they act as one and they overtake the other colony. And they never knew how they were able to do that. And it's called quorum, a quorum awareness. So that what happens is when these bacteria start to get to a large enough size, they're communicating with magnetism, that they've now communicated to the point that they know that they're at sufficient quantities that they can go and attack the other tribe. And it's even said that as we get close to somebody, that our bacteria are able to do a magnetic DNA of the bacteria of the person in front of us and be able to get an understanding of what kind of tribes are actually in that person. That is some of the talk that is happening between a lot of the people that are exploring this amazing new field that we call the microbiome, which, my view is it's a living brain. It's a living part of us that we have input into, that we can really make a huge difference by challenging our belief systems as to what we're doing daily and what really true life is about. It's a lot more than maybe what we've been sold. Question there?
They want to know when your garlic will be available at the Lexington Co-op.
Lexington will probably be in 2 weeks. We're going to have it in the store this weekend. We're going to make sure we got some. We still got half our garlic in the ground, but these dry conditions are making it dry out quite quickly.
And then someone wants to know if you got some books to share to help learn about the clean diet that you've been suggesting.
Yeah, I think the clean diet, EWG is one of the best, and then that other one, the Detox Project. Both of those are really good for consumers, really easy to dig into. I read books on it, and the primary thing you got to do is you got to eat organic, because organic means that they're not using chemicals on the food that can alter not only the food, but the microbiome that food is grown up in, and the microbiome that food has when it gets picked off the tree. There was just a recent study that showed that the microbiome on an apple that is grown commercially is completely different than the microbiome of an organically grown apple. And I only want to put an organically grown apple in my body, because when I took over this land and the farmer that was farming it, I said, I need a list. I need the last date you put a chemical on there, because I got 3 years I got to wait in order to get organic certified. He said, I'll give you the records for the season. There were 3 loose sleeve sheets, single line, that were filled up. Those are all the sprays that they put on one apple crop to be able to make a beautiful apple for everybody to have. So I've seen that. I understand that. I don't want that in my body. I'm very particular right now. I don't want to put, I had a saying that I had to keep saying to myself that was so insane. I continued to poison myself because it was too inconvenient to stop. I continued to poison myself because it was too inconvenient to stop. How insane is that? So I would stop and get a sandwich on the road, and the bread had poison in it because it was too inconvenient for me to find an organic food or plan ahead. And I had to keep saying that till finally I was able to realize how insane it was, that why would I want to put any poison in my body? And I just plan everything out. And if for some reason I have to eat something, I'm trying to make the healthiest choice I possibly could, so I don't expose myself to that. And it's a lot easier that way.
And then they just wanted you to repeat the drink recipe you mentioned earlier with the ginger.
Sure, and we also put that drink recipe, I believe it's on our YouTube station and our Facebook. I think we have it listed. So what I like to do is I take a kettle full of hot water, and I take the Vitamix, and I'll put a chunk of ginger, maybe a 1-inch piece of ginger in there, organic ginger. I put that piece of ginger in there, and then I'll take a quarter of a lime, organic lime, and I like to use the peel and all because there's tons of nutrition in that peel. So I use a quarter of a lime. What I do is I buy my limes and I cut them into quarters and I put them right in the freezer. That way I don't have any spoilage. So I can just pull one out of the freezer when I want it. I pop it in that Vitamix, and then I'll get some honey. I put some honey in there, and I put some cherry juice, and then I put the hot water in there. And I flip that switch on the Vitamix. I blend it right up really good. And then I get my big mug. I got a 1-quart mug, and I put a filter, a screen in there, and I pour that right through the screen, and it catches any of the fibers from the lime and from the ginger. And then I got this beautiful red drink. And boy, when you drink that, you can just feel how it's going through the microbiome. The honey is low glycemic. The lime is alkalizing to the body. The ginger is hitting the microbiome. Just a beautiful drink. Great. You can even take that one at night because the cherry will help you sleep. And the honey is a low glycemic sugar, so it won't spike blood sugar.
And then they just want to know what the YouTube channel address is.
Should be Singer Farm Naturals. Under that should be the YouTube channel. Yeah.
Now we have a couple people just wanting to make sure that next Wednesday we will have our 3rd follow-up meeting.
Yeah. Since we had technical difficulties last week, we will extend it so that we can have another meeting next week, and that we can help you on this journey to be able to understand more. And we'll get a little bit more in depth, a little bit about some of the advanced strategies that you can use to, let's say, get rid of Candida, because Candida is probably one of the nastiest pests to try to decrease their colony size because of the grip they can have on the human body. You know, going through withdrawal from Candida chemicals that they produce, you know, can be very difficult. You know, no different than an opioid addiction, going away from an opioid addiction. It's that intense. But there are ways to do that. And if you're mindful of what's happening, and I'll tell you very quickly, you know, there's a certain bacteria that you can buy, and you can take this bacteria in a form of a probiotic, and we'll explain how you take some organic fruit and you add this bacteria and you put it in your oven, and you produce this bacteria colony that's going to grow, and it's going to smell like yeast. And you're going to have this friend of yours. You're going to then put him in the fridge when he's done, and you're going to have a spoon 2 or 3 times a day. What he's going to do is he's going to take and he's going to replace Candida, push him out of the colony, because they're able to do that, but they're going to do that very mindfully without killing him. Because if you kill Candida, it produces all these neurotoxins that are terrible for your body, and you can go through terrible issues with Candida being killed off. So we're just going to replace them, and they're going to go out your body, and then this new bacteria that comes in there doesn't really hang around for a long time. It's going to want to go through, and you're going to have an opportunity to start to reinfest with the proper bacteria, so you can change that condition and get rid of those cravings once and for all, but do it in a very safe way, which won't be detrimental. And we'll talk about how you can do that.
And then we've just got a couple compliments for you. Teresa wants to let you know that she's a really big fan of your garlic and your cherries, and she's been using your tart cherry juice to make her own kombucha.
Awesome.
And then JP just wants to let you know you rock, and that they value your knowledge, commitment to eating healthy, and everything you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for doing this, because it really inspires me, and I learned something a long time ago, that a teacher always teaches what he needs to learn the most. So every time I have one of these classes, I'm able to dig deeper and learn more while I'm doing that and be able to share that with everybody. So I get just as much out of it. So that's the reason I do these. So it's great for all of us because, you know, it's not like this, like I'm this being that has this knowledge. No, it's all out there. And I'm just able to see something. I'm just a communicator. That's my job, is that when I see this stuff and I can relay it to make some other human being's lives a little bit easier and a little bit more understanding about what this experience is, you know, we're supposed to live this life and live long and die quick, not die slowly over time and have a painful, no. We're meant to be happy, to enjoy life, to feel blissful, even in the face of all the stuff going on. Desmond Tutu once said, you know, here's all this destruction, and all of a sudden you walked in and you were able to get people singing. And how did you do that inside of all that sadness? He says, we can still be happy within the sadness of the situation because we have that power within us. We have that ability to change our thoughts, that we can still be joyous for this life we have. We're still alive. So we don't have to be miserable about it. We can still take in, and singing can do that, and being with friends and sharing and helping, that all does it. So you can do all those things instead of dwelling on the negatives. And if we change the microbiome, it's a heck of a lot easier to see that side of it. You know, the glass is one drop full at times. That's all it is. But I'd rather be that than just about empty. At least I'm one drop full. So with that, I need to carry on. I've got some other commitments, but thank you, everybody. Any other questions, or are we set?
That's everything.
Great. We'll see you all next week, okay? Thank you. Awesome. That was great.